Ladies and gentlemen, isn't it ironic that films were meant to help us create our identities and our social norms, but the way that films are judged and the way that film awards are given out actually damage and obstruct these types of gender identities and how they're formed? What we say, ladies and gentlemen, is that, for example, last year, the Danish girl won the Oscar, right? Wait, it was nominated for an Oscar. But we say that when the Danish girl was nominated for an Oscar, it was a great moment for society because it meant that people were finally talking about how gender identities don't actually have to be associated with your biological identities. It was about how you didn't have to conform to gender norms. But the fact that the lead actor in that movie, Eddie Redmayne, he was conformed into a certain category. They judged him on the basis of he was the best actor, just because he was biologically born that way, because supposedly there are different standards for judging men and women. And we think that that is supremely damaging. And we're going to explain why that's the case. So first of all, let's just define the term straight, yes? So by talking about film and TV shows, we're talking about shows like the Oscars, like Emmys, movies like this. Shows like this, that they set the standards for how we judge our films, right? We say that a film is better if it gets an award. We say that a film is more politically correct, or that it has more of a message if you get an award. We say that these award shows are what determine what is cool and what is appropriate in film and therefore in culture. We say that the categories by gender that we're talking about are obviously, categories like Best Actor, Best Actress, where you give separate awards to these people just because on basis of their identity. No, thank you. And what we say is that why do these categories exist in the first place? We'll tell you that when these categories were first formed, it was for a good reason. Thank you. And we say that in the old days, it was because women were getting less screen time, because people didn't recognize that women were able to maybe perform and to lead movies, and that we wanted to even it out by giving them more recognition, by giving them a separate awards category. What we also say is that the time has changed. Now, even though women still face struggles in Hollywood, the struggle is no longer about how much screen time you have. Look at the top grossing films of the past couple of years. Look at The Hunger Games, look at Divergent, look at these kinds of movies. You have women leading young women who are actresses and who are able to represent, who are able to work as much or even better than men. We say that now the problem in Hollywood that women have to face is this idea that you have less pay than men. Even though you do the same work, you have less pay, you have less recognition for it. No, thank you. And what we say is that this is a different problem, and that by continuing to separate these categories, you actually damage these women more than they originally were supposed to. We say that the problem has moved on, and now it's about pay, and we say that these categories don't need to exist anymore. But further, we say that these categories existing actually causes further problems. What problems are we talking about? We're saying that this is an implication that there are double standards for judging men and women. For example, if we look at journalism, do we give out separate awards for journalism? Do we give out separate awards for men and women journalists, or for different newspapers? No, thank you. We say we don't have that. Why? Because men and women can write equally well. We say that the reason why we have sometimes gender-separated categories, for example in sports, is because people have different, like men and women are biologically different, yes. For example, the top score for a male runner may be different from the top score from a female runner. And we say that when there are biological differences that affect your ability, then we say that it's okay to have separate categories for those kinds of awards. But when we actually look at, no thank you, when we actually look at acting, what is acting, or what is directing, or what is art about? We say that men and women can create art just as well as each other, right? We say that even that there are no biological constraints that holding back. And what really having these categories, what you're saying is that no, men and women, they may have the same abilities, but you're judging them in a very different way. You're saying that men have to be judged on this basis, and women have to be judged on this other basis. You're implying that there's a double standard for how we judge men and women and their abilities, and that you can't judge them together.
Before you continue.
No, thank you. So what we say is that furthermore, this also causes another problem, which is that we say that this forces conformity. We know the LGBTQI movement, right? A lot of people right now, we now know in this current society that some binary or certain gender norms are not absolute. That some people can be born or they can identify with different genders, or maybe they don't identify with either genders, and they have their own basis of their sexuality and their own genders. And we say that when you have these things where you say if you want to earn recognition, if you want to get an award, then you must first submit yourself as either a male or a female actor. If you want to get recognition for these things, if you want to get recognition for your achievements, then you need to conform to a certain thing. And I'm going to further explain why that's bad later in my debate. So what we're going to say is we're going to abolish these categories, and we're going to replace it with very generic ones, right? We're not going to have a separate one for best actor, best actress, maybe just best entertainer. And we say that what's going to happen is that this will send out a message to people. Why will this send out a message to people? We said, first of all, when we look at film and TV shows, people already overanalyze the things that these people do, right? We look at celebrities and we say, this person tweeted something, what does it mean? We get our social context, we get our social norms from that. And we also say that the other thing is that the film industry, they definitely have more public relations, they have more outreach towards society, they're able to influence these people. We say that through these two ways, people will be able to get this message, people will be able to understand that just because you're a man or just because you're a woman doesn't mean that you have unequal ability, that you can be judged together because you have the same ability and you're able to be achieved the same thing. We say that this will also help people understand that you have the same ability, therefore you should also be paid equally. We say that that will also further benefit the gender problems we're facing in society and Hollywood right now. And we also say that this doesn't ask people to conform to a certain identity. You don't ask people to force yourself into either male or female or these kind of binary contexts when you want to be recognized for your achievement. Yes?
How do you explain different people from different races competing in the same category getting paid different amounts?
Well, what we say is that different people from different races, they can, being paid different amounts. Okay. We say that that's also a problem that the film industry needs to address, right? And we say that now we have these kinds of different equalities. We say that if you currently have these imposing categories and then you remove them, that sends out a statement. But what we say is that even though we also think that it's important that these minorities, that people of different races, they maybe get different pay, we think that's a debate for another day. Because when you remove restrictions, that sends out a message. And since there were no restrictions in the first place, maybe there are other methods that we could achieve equal pay between different races. But that's not the debate today. And what I'm going to talk about is we want people to be judged without the limitations of gender. We want their identities to not be damaged and not to be hindered by that. So I'm going to talk about how separate categories, no thank you, are harmful to identity, and my partner is going to talk about the inclusiveness and how that harms gender equality. Okay, so why do these So how separate categories are harmful to identity? First of all, we say that these films help us decide social norms, right? They help us decide what's cool or what's not. Before, when we had, before a lot of people smoked in films and people thought, oh, that was cool. But when the film industry started setting regulations saying that, no, you cannot show smoking in films, right? If you show smoking in films, there's a penalty or that you have to show it. That showed people that nowadays that's no longer an okay social norm. We say that these film industries and these film awards who decide what is good and what is not good for society, for these films, will further impact how we think about what is appropriate and what is acceptable. And we say that when these social norms shape our values, if you are we judge ourselves against those values. And what we have right now is that you have this idea that everything has to be separated into male and female, and that if you don't try to separate or conform yourself into those categories, then you're somehow abnormal, you're somehow different. And we say that the LGBTQI movement, it already faces a lot of doubt, right? A lot of people are even questioning whether or not this movement is legitimate, whether or not people actually have these identities. But we say that by the film industry sending out this message and removing these categories, then people will be able to say, oh wait, gender doesn't have to be a constraint, it doesn't have to be like the first thing you think about someone when you meet. It doesn't have to be the basis on which you judge people and their abilities. And we say that because this is damaging to the LGBTQI movement, because this damages our formation of identities, we are very, very proud to propose this motion.
So as long as we continue to shed away the real problem here that Team Proposition recognizes, which is the actual discrimination in salaries, we will not solve the inherent problem. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The motion before us today is this House believes that major film and TV awards should abolish award categories that are separated by gender. Now let us begin by accepting the definitions proposed by Team Proposition. I would like to clarify that Team Proposition needs to prove two main elements in order to win today's debate. The first one being that uniting categories, by uniting categories, we are solving the gender-derived problems of the film industry, and number two, that we are actually portraying gender roles in movies and TV shows. Now let us begin by refuting the key elements presented by Team Opposition thus far. They started talking about the Danish girl, and for this we have a couple of answers. precisely. How will the Danish girl be judged? As a male story, a male that has come all the way to fulfilling his dreams to become a woman, and precisely in that direction, going against the barriers of society, and thus be judged in a male category. And the second one, the second answer for that is that actually we are portraying the actual roles that are represented in movies and in TV shows, primarily male and female, because they are inherently different. And then they move on and say that in the old days we established different categories because women were treated as inferior. But what do you actually have today? And they recognize this. We have a problem of less pay. But the thing is, why do we continue to maintain this division? And it's not maintained in directors, in costumes, and in any other category. Why? Because they portray different roles. They comply with different stories and different elements that are inherent to their actual roles, because they are inherently different. And then they say, of course, the less pay is in itself an issue. But the problem of equality in award shows is not in itself so. Why? Because they are in prime time the same as men, and they're getting the same kind of awards. So the real problem here is actually wages. And then they talk about journalism, of us not actually dividing genders as it comes to journalism. Why is that so? Because it's not an activity determined by gender, in which gender and the portrayal of that gender is inherent to the activity which is actually taking place. Because why? Because in movies and in TV shows we're portraying identities, we're portraying genders and ways of thinking that are, and we must recognize, are inherently different. And then, of course, recognizing the element of the wage gap. And it should be judged, people should be judged in the movies by the role that they are actually complying, the story that they are actually putting forth in that particular performance. And then they move on with their second argument about separate categories, about the transgender and so forth. But again, wouldn't it be fair for transgender people that have, for example, wanted to be women that have wanted to become men to be judged precisely in the category that they wanted to become? We believe that this should be the case. For example, if a transgender wanted to become a man, he should be judged in that category, and precisely we're fulfilling his dreams, and he's actually portraying that role which is inherent to the storyline and to the movie itself that is being presented on screen. Now we have three main arguments for you today. The first one being lights, camera, action, the second one being to be or not to be, and the third one that will be developed by my second speaker, adding salt to the injury. Now let us begin with the first main argument, divided into two layers of analysis. Number one talking about the roles, and number two talking about the unfairness. Now let us begin with the first layer of analysis. Movies and TV shows show to the world stories which can either be fiction or real life. They portray and they usually sometimes they generate awareness in society, and they generate changes in it, both for entertainment and to show the world a certain problem. For example, the case of the Schindler List, actually showing the problems of the Holocaust and actually creating an awareness in the population. Now, in these stories that actually portray either fiction or reality, it is important to comply with the roles of the story, because it is incredibly different to portray a man and to portray a woman. Why? Because although we are equal, of course, in every term, the way that we think, the way that we are biologically set, changes the way that we think, and therefore the way that we portray and we are, for example, characters of a certain movie. For example, it is not the same to talk about, for example, 1984 Gandhi movie than the Out to Africa movie starring Meryl Streep, which is inherently different. For example, how can we draw the line between a mother actually showing her motherly instinct and giving birth to a child? How can that be compared to anything that actually a man does? So a question we'd like to pose to Team Proposition is, why is this the only category which is divided, which leads us into a second layer of analysis? Why is this so? Why don't makeup, directors and special effects not divided? Why? Because both experts and actors recognize that they are different in the tasks that they are doing. Why? Because their gender, it is important in the tasks that they are actually complying. It is not the same as in the case, for example, of journalism. So therefore, it wouldn't be fair for us to judge everyone with the same playing field if they're actually complying and showing different performances and different ways of understanding reality. And therefore, we've proven you two main points. One, the actual roles of men and women in motion pictures or in TV shows, and number two, the unfairness of actually judging everyone by the same set of rules. Now let us begin with our second argument, to be or not to be. But before I do so, we'll take a point from team proposition if they have one.
Can you prove how that gender actually matters to the storyline of a movie? Then these movies are about human qualities.
Thank you, sir. I get your point. The first one being is that, of course, they're about human qualities, but the very essence, for example, of transmitting a motherly sense of actually giving birth and the motherly love of a child is inherently different from a man to a woman. And the physical differences between men and women change the way they act and change the way they think, and thus that performance is in fact different. So moving on into our second argument, to be or not to be. If we apply team proposition scenario, we cannot guarantee that we will not have discrimination onwards in these awards. Why? Because currently we could say, and they themselves recognize that we have inequalities, for example, on wages. But we have overwhelmingly equality as it comes to award giving. Why? For example, in the Oscars, both male and women get prime time on the Oscars, and they get awards for both genders. But currently, in other walks of life, we have discrimination as it comes to actual genders. The problem being, for example, at Oscars 2016, black men and white men, the majority of white men were actually nominated. So if we put them together with men and women, how can we guarantee that we won't have active discrimination against women as we have, for example, with black men actually occurring today? So the way to change this is to actually raise awareness and to fight inequality. For example, in the US we don't still have a law that allows both men and women to earn the same amount of money, so this is the way to change it. And through great performances, through raising awareness. For example, Robin Wright from House of Cards gave a great performance in the series, and she didn't want to compete in the same category as Kevin Spacey. She wanted to earn the same amount of money, and thus she protested, and thus now she earns the same amount of money. Thus we've proven you two main points. The first one being the possible discrimination that we could be incurring on, and the second one being that the actual way to change it. That is why, Mr. Speaker, team proposition believes that this is not the way to fix the problem. Thank you.
Women of the House, do you feel that your abilities are inferior to men? Of course not. But Team Argentina, who happens to be male, do you feel that women have the same abilities as you do? Maybe you'll say no, maybe you'll say no when I ask you directly, but deep down in your heart, there's a subtle notion that women are inferior to you. Why? Because you separate them into different categories, which means that you judge them differently on the basis of gender, so people will view them differently. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, today I will give you my argument, which is on how this inclusiveness actually harms gender equality. But before that, let me give you some rebuttals to what my opponents have said so far. So the only point that opponents have brought up was on how males and females play different roles in the movies. Now I will analyze this on different levels. Firstly, they show that these people are inherently different. However, we believe this is not true because they have not proved to us how they are differently mentally. They said that males and females have different ways of thinking. Firstly, this may not be true as they have not proven that. Secondly, even if this is true, how does this with different way of thinking impact the overall storyline of a movie and impact the success of a movie? They have not proven that either. Now today, what on the government side we believe is that movies, they are there to portray human stories, and as long as the actors or actresses can encompass humanity in the stories that they portray, gender is not the most important priority inside these movies. The overarching themes which are often presented in the movie often are love, courage, and determination. And we believe that males and females, they can all share these same qualities because they are so essentially human qualities that any person in the world can portray. Now, no. These examples that the opposition gave, such as motherly love and giving birth, there are these biological differences that males and females have. We acknowledge that there are biological differences between males and females. However, there's a fine line between biological differences and those which we believe that they have the same ability. And the film industry, we believe that males and females have the same abilities inside the film industry because it doesn't involve a physical aspect where who runs faster or who is... No, thank you. After I finish this, who is stronger? So this is why we cannot equate these biological differences on the different roles that women or men will portray inside movies. Yes, before I'm...
Do you realize that men and women need to overcome different adversities and different biological problems when they actually characterize a person.
Okay, so you're still talking about biological problems. We believe this is not the case. Fine, if you want to have like a woman giving birth, sure, it's only possible when a woman does it. But we believe that the overall objective a movie is trying to reach to people is to encompass these ideas that humanity has been surviving on thousands of years of, like courage, determination, love. These are qualities that anybody can share, and biological differences don't matter to this. What you're talking about, like giving birth, these are more likely these subplots of the movie. They're not the most important aspect of a movie. They're only some certain elements that the movie has. Now onto my substantive, which is on how inclusiveness harms gender equality. Today, on the government side, we mean by inclusiveness is that females compete against females, and males compete against females. Now, what this does is that it doesn't allow, under the status quo, this is happening. And this does not allow the two genders to compete with each other directly. So what this is doing is that it implies that males cannot or should not compete against females and vice versa. Because they are different, because it also implies that there are different standards for males and females, and this is why they cannot compete with one another, because it would be unfair if a male competes with a female. This is what the current status quo is perpetuating, and we believe that it is time to change this. It is wrong because we believe that these female and males, as I said before, they have the same abilities in the film industry, so they should be treated equal and judged by the same criteria of your performance inside a movie, not because whether you're male or female, we give you different criteria. We believe how well you act, how well you encompass humanity inside movies, how well you portray these human elements. These should be the criteria that objectively be judged on you when you receive the Oscars or any film award. Before I move on.
Yes, you said yourself that, okay, if we had biological differences and if you could prove that, then they should have separate categories, like in sports. So if you just conceded that they have biological differences, then under your mechanism, it would apply that they deserve different categories.
No, we don't see why biological differences should impact the overall essence of a movie, because these biological differences, they account for a minor part of a movie's subplot, and that's why these biological differences should not be taken into account when you give awards to males or females, because we believe that whether they encompass humanity better, whether they act better, this is a more important criteria that we are looking for on the government side. Now, let's look at the original reasons for why female and males were separated into different categories. So the original intention was because females, they were disproportionately represented inside the film industry. Sure. So this is why you give them separate categories. Before, that we were talking about maybe 50 or 80 years ago. Now there was a separate category to give them equal opportunities. However, today in modern times, we see that there are equal representation of males and females inside the movie industry. And they have equal opportunities inside the film industry because they are often female lead roles, and female get about just as much airtime as a male actor does. So this shows that this equal opportunity is not a problem, at least not on gender lines in today's film industry. What this separation of category does in the current status quo, when females already have the same abilities as males and are equally represented as males, is that it enforces this subtle notion that males and females are inherently different and are unequal, and therefore cannot compete with each other. Please sit down. This is my first layer. The second layer is how this will lead to male condescending attitude towards women, and how this will lead actually to less pay for women, which they have to keep attacking. So males will act condescending towards women because they believe that themselves are better due to the subtle notion that they cannot compete on the same ground. So there must mean that there's something different between me and a female actress because we cannot compete together. Females still get less pay than males because males believe that females deserve less than they do because they're not competing equally. The problem is solved on our case, however, because males view females as equal competitors inside the film industry because they are all competing for the same awards. So this shows that they are equal opponents. They are worthy opponents that I should respect. Now, based on the fact that they have equal abilities, which we have already established. Now, they also, and this also goes with this idea of affirmative action. So they have talked about how there are different people from different races, and this is a problem in the movie industry. We believe that yes, this is a problem in the movie industry. However, this problem of male and females not being represented equally is not a current problem. The current problem lies with race, as they have talked about. Like affirmative action, when other people feel there's a different standard for African Americans when compared to white people feel that they do not deserve these positions. They were selected in because of their race. Now this holds true for their case if they were to separate males and females, because you now solely give females awards because of the fact that they were females, and you hold them under different criteria. So ladies and gentlemen, for these reasons, the government side is incredibly proud to propose today. Thank you.
Team Taiwan can change the name of the problem, drop some glitter on it, or sweep it under the rug. But sadly, it doesn't make it go away. That is why, Mr. Speaker, we are opposing the motion this House believes that major film and TV awards should abolish award categories that are separated by gender. Let me remind you that the burden side of the proposition needs to prove or not to win this debate. They need to prove that by uniting these categories, we will be solving these gender problems. But let me remind you what the gender problems are, in fact. These are wages. They are the problem of money and problem of prestige and respect between men and women, something this side of the prop has misunderstood throughout this debate. So how do we tackle this issue? Two arguments. First, lights, camera, action, and second one, to be or not to be, in which we spoke about how the real problem were wages, on how there were strict distinctions on why men and women were separated on these categories and not on the rest. Now, before moving on with the last argument, which is adding insult to injury, we'd like to refute some of the points provided by the side of the prop thus far. First, beginning with the problem itself, something that the side of the proposition misunderstood throughout this debate. We see that men and women are only separated for certain awards, which are leading actor or leading actress. We see that they're not separated for anything else. And aside the op, we believe that there is a reason why they're separated for these categories and not for the rest. We see how they have the same prizes for best director, for best makeup, for best sound effects. Why? Because we believe that under these circumstances, they are equal in terms of biology, they are equal in terms of the mind, and in anything they can actually show to the world. But when it comes to acting and showing their bodies away and expressing themselves, we believe there are certain biological differences that require separation of these categories. But moreover, we see that the real problem is not even this separation. The real problem is the issue of the wage gap, which still occurs on their side, since they haven't been able to prove that on their side of the house, by joining these categories, women will get paid the same amount as men, women will get the same prestige as men, something they forgot to tackle on their arguments. And continue on with this, we see that Meryl Streep has never complained about not winning Best Actor, but she has complained about not earning the same amount of money as her fellow companions. We see the real issue underlining the problem with these category divisions is the money that comes. We'll show two things. First, that it can be done in other ways that actually don't hurt the people, and two, that on their side of the house, they don't get those benefits. So now, moving on to the next problem was talent, in which they said that these people were actually equally talented and thus should be portrayed and judged under the same category. We will never deny that these men and women have the same talent. We do believe that they have the same talents, but we believe that their meritocracy for gaining this award comes from different angles. We see the meritocracy for men and women are different. Why? Because they are overcoming different biological adversities within their lives. Because a woman can be characterized as she was growing up as not being able to become an actress because of certain things that society put on her. Thus, her price is different on the terms of meritocracy as men that maybe did not have the same adversities. In many cases, the prizes that are given to women are even more prestigious than the prizes given to men. Moreover, we would tell you that on our side, men and women are getting equal recognition. Why? Because they get the same amount and the same relevance of award, since winning Best Actor is equal to winning Best Actress in terms of money and prestige around the world. We will tell you that they have equal presence on primetime when we give them separate awards. Why? Because we're not saying you should compete together, we're saying you get a prize and you get a prize as well. But moreover, we see how on our side of the house, actually companies will try to focus on women. Why? Because as the first speaker of the prop said, companies want to gain more prizes so their movie or their TV show is more prestigious. So they will try to focus more on women, give them more opportunities. Why? So they can get the prize from the side of the women. So on our side of the house, we do get equality in talent, but we also get equality in opportunities, which is what we want to advocate in this debate. Moreover, when we get to the issue of money, they said that this would damage women even more. So staying in the status quo would damage women even more. For this, we have two answers. The first one is that we believe that joining them will not solve the wage differences. We brought the example of different races within the same categories. These two different people, these two different men within the same categories aren't getting paid the same amount. We see no reason why when we join women into the same melting pot, we will get women being paid the same as men, being paid the same as men from different races when it's not happening in the status quo. But moreover, we will tell you that since we're advocating for equal pay, we believe that is possible to do without necessarily joining these categories and without necessarily getting all the detriments from their side of the house. We can bring the example of tennis, where men and women are paid equally, and Serena Williams nowadays is the highest paid tennis player. Why? Because she's beating everyone else, not because of a gender issue, because she's beating and she's the best that there is. That is why she's getting all the prizes. Then they brought this case of the Danish girl, which was already refuted, but we'll bring two more answers. First, we believe that we're telling a story of a man that found his gender identity. It is still a story of a man, it's not a story of a woman. But second, we will tell you that in many cases, when we deal with transgender people, they are getting awards dependent on their gender identity and not the identity that was given by their biological body. We can bring the example of Laverne Cox, that was a man turned into a woman in Orange is the New Black, and now he or she nowadays is getting recognized in prizes for women, which is his gender identity. So we see on our side of the house, and in the status quo, we don't have the problem of transgender people. Moreover, they brought the case of image, how we are damaging the image nowadays. What we will tell you is two things. First, they brought no analysis on how joining them would give them a better image and no examples. But moreover, we believe that the real issue in the second layer is the role that women are getting in these movies. We believe that in many cases they are undermining their image on itself. We see that when a woman is playing a dumb blonde in 2.5 Men, that is what is damaging her image. Or we can also tell you that what is damaging her image is not getting paid equally as men, not competing for the same awards. We believe that is completely something different. And it won't be changed, these different roles and different money won't be changed by joining them together. And then they brought this last point, which was a bit crazy and late, in which they said, one moment please, that competing against each other is going to create respect, since we are fighting for the same thing. Two answers for this: we believe that first, by accepting our differences and working together is when we create respect, because we need to accept that women or men are different, but they require the same respect. Second answer we tell you is that equality and prestige in the status quo is reached when people accept that they are equal. I'll take that point.
Do you believe that women aren't getting the same amount of pay as men inside the film industry because of male condescending attitude towards the women, and they believe that
I understand your point. I do accept that men and women are not being paid equally in the status quo. I do believe that the answer that you're proposing in your side of the house won't change that, for one answer. And second, will create even more detriments that will create a gender clash between men and women, which will be developed in my next argument. But before that, let's get to the questions that were provided in this debate. We asked the question, why is this the only category that is divided nowadays? Why do we get equal respect for actors and directors, but not for directors and producers, but not for actors? For this we heard mute silence. It's out of time. Mute silence. They gave us no specific answer, but they asked another question to us. Do you think women are inferior to men? For which we answered, no, we don't believe that women are inferior to men. And just by separating them, we don't believe that they are inferior. We see that your first speaker yourself conceded the fact that division in biology is needed when it comes to sports. We believe that we're just extending that onto movies, since the second speaker already accepted the fact that there are some biological differences that factor in within this point. So now, in the last argument for the silo prop, we see how this would create a gender clash between men and women. Why? Because when a man is competing against a woman, it won't be the individual against the individual, which is true meritocracy, but it will actually be a clash of men against women, in which when a woman beats a man for best actor or actress, then that would be women beating men instead of the individual being the best that he or she could be. Therefore, we would create even more detriments in the social clash that is happening nowadays between men and women. We believe that is even more detrimental to the cause we're fighting for today. For that reason, we believe that we've tackled the issue for the side of the problem, and we continue to stand by the phrase that hiding problems doesn't make them go away. Thank you.
We don't think inequality is okay, but at the same time, we believe it is okay for these two genders to be seen as a judge on different criteria, to have them to be seen as different categories. That is the type of reasoning that is coming from side opposition. And today, we on side proposition, we believe that it is inherently a contradiction on itself. Now, before I continue on with my rebuttals to my previous speaker, then I'm going to first of all have a clarification as to the confusion they had to side proposition stance, which is that they had repeatedly talked about how because there are biological differences within male and female actors, and because we conceded the fact that there are differences in sports, and they said following that line of reasoning, that automatically means that therefore biological difference in acting should of course be taken into consideration. But today we on side proposition, we tell you that that is not the case. The reason that sports actually have this distinction between each other is because the body, the physical abilities actually affects their performance. We're not talking about a time where the awards are actually a consideration, like say if this male actor or if this female actor better portrays Queen Elizabeth. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a situation where the awards are given for, let's say, if this male actor better portrays the individual characters, which means that these people, these male actors, these female actresses, we are considering their performance in portraying the individual characters they were given. We are judging by their performances, by their ways of actually assuming that role. We're not judging, like say, later please, we're not judging the way, like say, this male actually is able to portray a mother. So we don't see how that line of reasoning actually fits into our arguments. Now onto our clash, which is the first clash is who actually achieves better wages for these female actors in the long term, and second of all, who actually better achieves equality. So onto our first clash. We came up here and we told you how right now we have these arbitrary categories, right? Male and female are judged differently, even if they can say maybe that is actually not the case. We say it portrays the idea that male and female have different abilities, therefore they are judged based on different criteria. Because since they're all doing the same thing, they are all actors, they are all actresses, they are all doing the same thing as, like say, portraying, like my previous speaker had told you, these human qualities. Since it is that they are doing these same things, we believe that it is already fine for them to be judged, like say, on their skills of portraying their individual characters alone. We already have, let's say, rising star awards, which means that we already are able to judge these people, judge these male and female actors and actresses based on their performances alone and not taking into account their genders, which is why we believe there is actually no benefit at all coming out right now in our situation, coming from separating these male and female actors in when we're actually giving them awards. Now, before I move on, yes.
How can you specifically guarantee that by joining categories they will magically become equal and be treated as such and stop with the gender inequality?
Yes, thank you. We understand our point. I will deal with that in my later class, but first of all, let me just answer that anyways. Because what you are saying right now is that even if we still separate them in, like say, male and female categories, it's going to give, like say, the companies more incentive to actually better these female roles. But we see, first of all, that is not going to happen under your side because these companies, they only wish to better these female, in like say, the female actor roles. That doesn't automatically mean that they will actually be able to compete with these male actors because they're already judged separately. So they might be able to, like say, outcompete with the other female actors and have relatively higher pay compared to these female actors. But that does not achieve the idea of equality where we say these are all actors. We just judge them on their skill and not based separately because these are males and these are females and they are subtly different, so their skills are different. That is the idea we believe we can actually perpetuate the notion, even if we do not, later please, even if we do not actually accomplish something intangible, we still have more benefits as compared to your side. Because we at least perpetuate the notion that we believe people should not be judged simply because of their gender, as we have proven to you why in the category of acting, the notion of gender separating them is actually arbitrary. So on to my first class, which is why we talked about we can actually achieve better wages. Because as of right now, we say in our current status quo, they said, later please, they said that they acknowledge and concede to the fact that right now in our current status quo, male and female actors do have separate pay. And we say that is because people judge them separately. Because right now we see that these separate categories of judging these actors, right? They cannot mean that maybe they have different criteria for judging these actors and actresses, later please. And that means that they might have, like, say, separate skill sets. So we say, if we actually unite them into one category, it forces the people to actually judge them only based on, like, say, their individual acting skills, their abilities to assume these, later please, to assume these human qualities. So we say, on our side, we actually bring attention that the fact that right now, even if right now you're saying, later please, even if right now you have this gender equality parades, people are trying to bring this to our attention. We do that even better because we say right now, something like say awards, it is something we give as a criteria, it is a judging criteria. We say that it is not okay for you to be judging these people, these actors, their skill sets simply because they are male or because they are female. And as my previous speaker had already explained to you, but as the media, as the film industry, as an award show, they actually have more influence in portraying the idea that these things as criteria are arbitrary and inherently wrong. Their only line of response to that is because they are males and females, their mindsets are different, so therefore this this categorization should actually exist. But as my previous speakers had already told you, while in the field of acting, that type of separation does not actually exist. So on to my second question, which side actually better brings equality. They say we are going to bring awareness to that. We are going to let companies have the incentive to actually better these female actresses. But today what we tell you is that we better able to do that, as we have already told you. But on their side, these female actresses may be able to, like say, be more able to compete with other female actors, but in the end, they will still be viewed as different from these male actors, and that is what in today's debate we don't actually want. First, we have told you why in this case, once we actually bring it to the attention that judging by gender is actually not going, we actually increase the attention of these people onto this idea that simply judging because of their gender is not okay. We can actually better achieve the idea of equality. Now, before I move on this,
Why don't we have equality of pay for people from different races within the same category?
yes, we understand that. However, as my previous speaker had already told you, the principle we are arguing on today is that simply because some arbitrary distinction does not exist, that means that we actually have to unify it into one category. You're not talking about how we say different races should actually get, like say, higher wages, or these other, or should actually get higher wages. But today we say that that is actually not in today's debate. If you actually want to, like say, increase wages in other for these people in the minority groups, you can do that, but that does not mean you should judge their, like say, you should judge their individual acting merits separately simply because they are in different genders. So let me recap what I have told you so far. On the first class, we told you as to why we are actually better able to achieve better wages for these people, because we bring to the attention that these people are actually not that separate. It's just simply because they are male and female does not mean that they actually have differences in their acting skill. And secondly, we also tell you how by doing this we actually bring it to more attention, because we say that right now it's simply not okay for you to be doing this. We bring it to more attention. They simply pass the one-liner, we will bring awareness, and they actually offer no explanation on that part. And on the second clash, we also tell how we better achieve the idea of equality, because we tell today that they are all actors and we should all judge them on this criteria, and that the problem they talked about, the reason why the separate categorization exists, does no longer exist in our status quo, which is why we are so proud to propose.
There is a reason why Meryl Streep isn't asking to compete in a male category. There is a reason why Julia Roberts doesn't do the same thing. And it's because they understand that when it comes to judging a film, when it comes to judging a movie, and when it comes to judging the actors, they understand and comprehend that there are different types of ways to do so. And they understand that there are physical, biological, and mental differences between both genders that would allow for different criteria. So why is it that if it's not a problem for them, Team Proposition had to come here and invent one for them? So the issue that they had to prove to us today is that eliminating these categories will not only solve the gender-derived problems in the industry, but second of all, that this is actually a significant problem for them to be debating this here. So I'll divide my speech into two main parts. I'll begin in the refutation, divided in clarification, the questions, points, and then the points of clash, and my second part will be the summary of the case. So beginning with the clarification. So the first and most wrongful example they presented here was a Danish girl as a main fundament for their analysis. So the first thing I would tell you is that a man playing a woman is precisely this movie is precisely about a man portraying a man transitioning into a woman. The second thing I would tell you is that taking them on their highest moral ground about eliminating stereotypes, we would see that this is a story about a man going beyond every single gender barrier and every single creative barrier that the society imposes, and being able to portray feelings that they so much allow. But the third thing I would tell you is that even if he has to be judged as a man, as a biological man who went beyond all of those biological limits to the point where he could actually portray and be a credible, for example, woman. So it wouldn't even be fair for him to be judged in the same category as a woman, because they start with different barriers. They start with different starting points. No, thank you. The second thing that they said is that we have less pay in Hollywood. So with this we agree, but the second thing is that this doesn't connect with actually the thing of the categories. We understand that the problem is that there is an equal pay for equal work, but they haven't really shown a direct correlation to why if we unite the categories, we will have equal pay for equal work. So third of all, if they could improve that, and they said that that was a problem, how is it that they believe that their argument stands? Another thing that they told us was that when you have a biological differences, then it should be enough. And the answers they gave you that in sports that is enough. And then they said textually, the first speaker said that if the same analogy can be applied to this. So if they then later recognize that we have biological differences between men and women, then they have to recognize that because of their same line of argumentation, we have to have different categories between men and women. That is if we're only questioning the biological differences, which they actually agreed upon. Then they said, how does gender impact a movie? Okay, so let's get real for a moment. Let's see how it directly impacts a movie just basing ourselves on the movie itself. So we asked them a simple question. Would it be the same thing for a movie, with just movie purposes, to have a man portraying to be a mother having birth and portraying the same feelings as a mother that only a mother understands towards a child, that only a mother can experience through childbirth? No, we don't think so. But on the other hand, they couldn't give an example. Let's think of another one. If a book is based on a storyline which is a woman doing something, for example, Margaret Thatcher, do you believe that a man playing Margaret Thatcher will have the same impact to the people than a man doing so? We don't think so. So even if we only took the movie and we only spoke about the impact towards the movie and the message it tries to send, it wouldn't also be helping. So they also spoke about inclusiveness, promoting about equality, inclusive promoting equality. But first of all, we would say that people who discriminate now won't stop discriminating just because they see them on the same category. The second thing we would tell is that we presented an example when black men and white men were allowed to compete in the same categories, for example. People didn't stop being racist and people didn't stop discriminating them. This year in the Oscars, we saw that not a single black man was nominated. So we've already shown you an example where this didn't even happen. But even if there is no guarantee that by joining them, and they couldn't prove it, and we said it in the POI, and they couldn't give a concrete example on how they can guarantee that by joining them, they will reach equality. And the second thing we would tell you is that this is because they have specific differences. So another clarification is that they said that we're just judging emotions and skills. So first of all, we say, okay, you're judging emotions and skills. But the second thing we will tell you is that that's not the only thing that you're judging. You're going to have to judge the way in which an actor starts and the way in which the character develops in the movie. So if you see that there is a man, for example, in Eddie Redmayne's case, who went beyond all those barriers towards to portray a woman, then how is it that you're only judging emotions? So moving on to the questions of this debate, we asked them, how can you guarantee that they will stop with discrimination? So this is exactly what we heard, pure silence from them. They didn't actually explain how it is that they will guarantee that by joining them in the same category, they would actually promote equality and that people will stop discriminating. And then we said, isn't the biological difference enough? And to which they said that yes, it was enough in their first speech. So we don't really see, and so these were the two questions that they didn't answer correctly. So moving on to the first point of clash, about gender. They said that we're setting stereotypes and it's not obliging people to go into one category and that identities are harmed and what's good and acceptable. And they talked about the LGBT community. So let's analyze this by parts, about the setting stereotypes. We're not setting stereotypes for men and women because we see that different men and different women portray their characters in different ways. So we're not saying the same stereotype of what it is to be a woman or what it is to be a man. But moving on to the LGBT point that they brought up. What would you think if an actress like Laverne Cox, which fought all of her life to become a woman, were now said, okay, you have to go beyond everything you've just fought for and just go and compete in a male category. So even if we already won on the ground of the LGBT community, which they love to defend so much, no, thank you. And they also said that the identities are harmed if it's good and acceptable. But again, with the same examples, it's harming an identity of a person who has fought all their life to become a woman to make them compete in a male category. But even if we saw no examples and no analysis as to why it's actually harming their identity to make them compete in different categories, we don't see any actress saying that her identity was or was not harmed because they have to compete in an exclusively female category. So moving on to the second point of clash, about equality. They said that we need to join them to be equal and that we are all equal and we need affirmative action. So with the point of affirmative action, by imposing this, we would actually see that they will be winning prizes just because they're women. So affirmative action isn't really the answer here. And they also said that we're also equal. Yes, we agree with this. We're all equal in rights, we're all equal in opportunity, but it doesn't mean that we all have to be judged equally on the same basis. And that's what here Team Opposition is defending, because we understand that if discrimination if male and women are portraying playing in the same categories, for example, as makeup, direction, and other things, the experts consider and the differences acknowledge that there has to be separate categories in the case of acting. Because if people were so if the industry was so discriminative on this topic, as you say, how is it that they let them compete in other categories together? But before I continue, I will take a few away.
Okay, so if actors cannot be judged on the same level because they're biologically different, then why, and like people find this legitimate, then why are the BAFTA Rising Star Awards also a category, a reward for actors? Why do people also think this is a prestigious award?
First of all, I don't really understand the analysis you're posing here, and I think the reply speech isn't a good enough time to explain it. But second of all, we would tell you that it's because you admitted in your first speech that biological differences are enough. It is why we believe that this point stands for us. So they also didn't prove to us how it is that joining them will actually lead to equality. So we've actually explained to you in our first argument, for example, how they defend different roles and how they are actually different, and that is why we cannot judge them with the same pole around with the same bar all of the actors. In our second argument, we explained to you how they cannot guarantee, we gave you examples, that there will stop being discrimination and they will achieve equality. And in our third argument, we explained how this is actually adding an insult to the injury, because not only the real problem is the wage gap, for example, between actors, but they presented no example of actually an actor complaining that this was in fact an actual problem. So Mr. Speaker, if there is one message that has to prevail from this debate, is that we're going to solve equality. We cannot just find a possible long-term solution and hope the team proposition finds a way to solve equality. We actually have to solve it using the real issues and the real problem. This is why we stand by the phrase that hiding problems doesn't make them go away.
Painting a broken car in pink won't make it right. Ladies and gentlemen, the side of the proposition has not understood what the real problem was in this debate. They actually shifted the problem, changed it, covered it, and said the problem was fixed. But sadly, band-aids don't fix bullet holes. So to analyze what we've seen in this debate, we'd like to answer three main questions. The first one is, are men and women equal? The second one is, do men and women need a division? And the third one is, are the categories to blame? So let's get to the first one. Are men and women equal? The answer to this, for our side of the house, is no. Men and women are not equal in every sense. Men and women are not the same. That is why we have a division in genders. But the next question they pose to us is one of them inferior to the other one? And yet again, the answer is no. What do we stand by in this debate then, for the side of the aisle? We believe that men and women require equal respect and meritocracy. We believe in equality in opportunities, not saying that two different things are completely equal. We believe that some division is needed because of the fact that there are differences. We believe that outside the aisle, true equality is found when we accept our differences that exist in fact and work from that point on into a point of mutual respect. We believe that by joining them together, giving no analysis and just merging categories, we will not reach a point in which we will have equal respect and equal opportunities. So on the issue of prestige, we see that the awards are equal on our side. Why? Because the two awards of Best Actor, Best Actress are actually the same in prestige and money. We see on our side of the house, we actually told you how we are giving them equal TV and movie representation, since companies will actually encourage these women on getting big TV roles, while on their side of the house, they won't have this, but on the other hand, they will have a clash between men and women. They will have a competition that we believe will not be friendly at all. What we believe that they need to prove in this debate is that joining them will give them equal prestige and equal representation, which they never did. They actually stated the fact that if we join them together and make them compete against each other, then that will create equality, something that was never proven. Thus, that question falls to our side. So the second question is, do men and women need a division? On our side, we believe that they do. We need to accept that there are certain biological differences that actually play a role in the performance that these people develop on stage. We see that the role that they play within movies are different, and the merit itself that comes from a woman and from a man is actually different as well because of the adversities that they had to overcome in their career to get to this point. So the prize means a different thing for men and for women, because maybe for society society was against women in their role, when in the other hand it might not be against men. So the division again falls in the categories, represent different things in the prizes themselves. Then they brought this issue of transgender people. We told you that transgender people actually do get a place on our side. We brought you an example. They did none of this. And the issue of opportunities, we believe that yet again it falls on our side. Because even if we assume that the system is so corrupt as the side of the proposition is showing it today, we see that when we unite men and women on the same category, then we would have less prestigious awards, less prizes going to women. Why? Because if the system is so corrupt and sexist, they will all go towards men. The last question is, are the categories to blame? They brought this point on saying the intrinsic division between men and women are to blame for the inequality. So simply by putting them in different categories means that women are inferior to men. Something we believe is completely ridiculous. Why? Because we believe that categories mean nothing when it comes to respect and when it comes to prestige. We see how black men and white men don't get equal pay because they are in the same category. So the category itself is not the determining factor in the pay of the actors, in the prestige of the actors. Moreover, we told you that there are no assurances that on their side of the house, women are going to be paid equally as men, since they brought no guarantees, no examples, and no analysis on this. But us, on the other hand, we brought you the examples of sports in which they conceded that these biological differences actually do require a division, and we brought you the case that we actually can get to equality without this necessarily uniting of these two divisions. For those reasons, ladies and gentlemen, we continue to stand by the phrase that hiding problems doesn't make them go away. Thank you.
Of us today and our opponents is who better achieves gender equality. And we will prove to you today why we have achieved this on our best case and our worst case scenario, while they have not on their best and worst case scenario. Before that, let me give some rebuttals to the previous speakers. So firstly, they have brought up this point on how it is meritocracy that leads to the people getting awards. And that is exactly why we believe that we should group them together. Because when we think of the best, it is whether it is female or male, they are the ones who can best portray their roles that they are given. So this is, our system is really based on meritocracy, and that point does not stand. Now, their logic on the government side goes like this. So you don't believe women are inferior to men, but they cannot compete with one another. So are you implying that they don't have the same abilities? Is that why they cannot compete to each other? And taking your logic to the fullest extent, why are people in different races given the same Best Actor award? Like an African American and a white person has to compete for the Best Actor award in the same bracket. So is your side? That's obviously because we don't see that they have different abilities. So on our side, we can equate this to men and women because we believe that they also don't have different abilities, and we believe that they are the same and they are equal. The opposition whip has talked about biological differences. Now today, we believe that awards aren't given to the people because of the gender they play. For example, if a character was to act of Queen Elizabeth, it's not because which gender can better portray Queen Elizabeth we're giving the award. We're giving the award because which individual can better portray the character that they're giving. And in this case, it's Queen Elizabeth. So whether it is male or female, it doesn't matter as long as the actor can better portray their roles. Now, in women and men on biological differences of giving birth, we're not saying that there has to be males portraying pregnant women. We're saying that pregnant women giving birth should not be the criteria of why the award is given to them because it fits their biological function. Even if that was the point of the movie, we believe that they deserve the award because they portrayed the scene well, not because they were a woman and it fits their biological function of giving birth. Now let me compare the worlds for the judges. On the government side, our best case scenario is that males and females compete on the same playing field. And males will view females as a result of this as equal competitors, and therefore will respect them because there is a potential that males will lose to females. That is the link between forcing them to compete and gender equality, and we have already proved this in our speeches. And also, LGBT people are not forced to choose an identity on male or female, and this was established in my Prime Minister's speech. This will lead to equal pay between male and female because the women and the men view each other as equal, therefore deserving the same amount of salary. This is our best case scenario. Then the best case scenario on our opponents is that males and females cannot compete in the same bracket awards, and males still view females as inferior because they are separated. They think that if women are so good, why can they not compete in the same bracket as I am? So they are actually separated, and people don't think that they can compete together because on their side of the notion, they're perpetuating this notion that they are not equal and they cannot compete together. The worst case of our side is that women are not guaranteed to win because they have this other male competitors that they have to go against. However, it still sends out a powerful message when they do win because it shows to people that women can still achieve even when males are their competitors. So over time, the women's pay will still rise because men see that they can still achieve even when males are competing against them. And see, our best case and worst case scenarios are vastly superior to their best case scenario. And our worst case and best case both achieve equality and both give women and men the same amount of pay, which is we fulfill the burden in this debate today. And for these reasons, we take the debate today. Thank you.